We were struggling financially. I didn't know my wife was saving for a life without me. The worst year was the one where we stopped turning on lights in rooms we weren't using. Patricia would walk through the house at dusk, checking every switch, making sure we weren't wasting electricity. Dinner happened in near darkness most nights, just the stove light and whatever came through the kitchen window. Evan was 16 then, Mara 12. They never complained. They'd finish homework by lamplight in their rooms, come down when called, eat whatever we'd stretched across 4 plates. Spaghetti 3 nights a week, rice and beans when meat got too expensive. Sandwiches when we were really tight. Nobody said we were struggling. We just moved quieter, used less, expected less. Patricia would lay out the bills on Sunday nights, sorting them into piles. Pay now, pay next week, call and negotiate. She was calm about it, methodical. Made it seem manageable. We're doing okay, she'd tell me, as long as we're careful. I believed her. We were enduring this together, for our kids, until things got better. That's what I thought anyway. Patricia managed our budget with the kind of authority that felt reassuring. She knew every dollar, every due date, every account balance. I'd bring home my paycheck, and she'd deposit it, dividing everything into envelopes: rent, utilities, groceries, gas. We're barely getting by. She'd say, showing me the math, but we'll make it if we're smart. I'd nod, grateful she could handle it. Numbers overwhelmed me. I was good at my job, decent at providing, terrible at planning. Patricia was the opposite. She could look at a spreadsheet and see 6 months ahead. She'd reassure me constantly. Don't worry, Ray, I've got this under control. And I didn't worry. I trusted her completely. 20 years of marriage built that trust, brick by brick. She'd been beside me through everything. My father's death, the job I lost in 2008, Evan's emergency surgery when he was 7. Why would I doubt her now? She was keeping us afloat. She was the reason we hadn't drowned. Later I'd realized control and partnership aren't the same thing. But back then, I just felt grateful. Evan came home one Tuesday and announced he'd gotten a job at the grocery store. Stocking shelves, weekends, and 2 afternoons after school. Minimum wage, but steady. You don't have to do that, I told him, something heavy settling in my chest. I want to, he said, not meeting my eyes. It's fine, Dad, I don't mind. But I minded. He was 16. He should have been playing basketball, or hanging out with friends, or doing whatever kids do when they're not worried about electric bills. Instead, he was working because he'd figured out, without us saying anything, that we needed help. Patricia hugged him, told him how proud she was. I watched her face, looking for the same guilt I felt, but she just seemed grateful. Practical. Mara watched from the doorway, too young to work but old enough to understand what Evan's job meant. She didn't say anything. She just went back to her room. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about my son sacrificing his childhood because I couldn't provide enough. The weight of that felt unbearable. Mara asked her mother a question one morning while I was getting ready for work. I heard it through the bathroom door. Mom, why do you get weird when Dad talks about money? Silence. Then Patricia's voice, carefully controlled. I don't get weird, sweetie. You do, Mara insisted. You kind of freeze, like when he asks if we can afford something. That's just stress, Patricia said. Money is stressful for everyone. But you always say we're okay, so why would you be stressed if we're okay? I stopped shaving, listening. Mara, it's complicated, Patricia said, her tone sharpening slightly. Adults have to worry about things kids don't understand yet. I'm 14. I understand more than you think. Another silence. Then Patricia changed the subject, asking about homework. I heard Mara's footsteps heading upstairs, heavier than necessary. When I came out, Patricia was at the kitchen sink, staring out the window. Everything all right? I asked. Fine, she said without turning around. But Mara's question stuck with me. Why did Patricia freeze? What was she stressed about if we were managing? I started selling things without telling anyone. Small things first, old tools I never used. A guitar I'd bought years ago and barely learned to play, some collector's coins my uncle left me. I'd list them online, meet buyers in parking lots, deposit the cash into our account. It felt like the right thing to do. The man's responsibility. I was supposed to absorb the burden, wasn't I? Protect my family from feeling the full weight of our situation? Patricia noticed the deposits but didn't ask questions. She'd just update her spreadsheet, redistribute the money across her envelopes, thank me quietly. "This helps," she'd say. "Really helps." I felt useful then. Necessary. Like I was contributing to our survival in ways that mattered. Evan noticed the empty spaces in the garage. "Where's your guitar?" "Sold it," I said. "Wasn't using it." He looked at me for a long moment, something sad in his expression. "You loved that guitar." "I love you more," I said, trying to make it sound lighter than it felt. He nodded, but he didn't smile. He just went back to his homework. When my brother offered to help us, Patricia refused before I could even consider it. "We don't need charity," she said firmly, her jaw tight. "It's not charity," I said. "It's family. He knows we're struggling." "Which is exactly why we shouldn't take it," Patricia replied. "We have dignity, Ray. Independence. The moment we start depending on other people, we lose control of our lives." "We're barely hanging on," I said quietly. "But we are hanging on," she insisted. "We're managing. We don't need his pity or his conditions." I didn't push it. She was probably right. My brother meant well, but accepting help always came with strings, spoken or unspoken, and Patricia had always been proud. It was one of the things I'd loved about her, that strength. "Okay," I said. "We'll keep managing on our own." She nodded, satisfied. "We'll be fine. Trust me." And I did trust her, completely, without question. That was my mistake. I started noticing something strange. While I felt the financial pressure like a weight pressing down on my chest every morning, Patricia seemed fine, calm, almost serene in her organization of our chaos. She'd sit at the kitchen table with her laptop and papers, working through bills with the focus of someone solving a puzzle rather than someone drowning. No panic, no desperation, just steady, methodical management. "How do you stay so calm?" I asked her once. She looked up, surprised by the question. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I'm terrified half the time, worried we'll miss a payment or lose the house or—" I stopped, not wanting to voice all my fears. "But you always seem prepared. Like you know something I don't." She smiled slightly. "I'm just realistic, Ray. Panicking doesn't pay bills. Planning does." It made sense. It should have reassured me. But something about her composure felt off. Not wrong exactly, just disconnected from the stress she claimed we were both carrying. But I pushed the feeling away. She was stronger than me. That's all. Patricia opened a new bank account without discussing it with me first. I only found out because a confirmation letter came in the mail. "What's this?" I asked, holding up the envelope. "Emergency fund," she said casually, not looking up from her phone. "Separate account so we're not tempted to touch it unless we absolutely have to." "We have a joint savings already," I said. "That's almost empty," she replied. "This is different. Just a safety net." "How are we funding a safety net when we can barely cover groceries?" she sighed, finally looking at me. "Small amounts, Ray. $10 here, 20 there. It adds up. You'd be surprised." "Can I see the statements?" Her expression shifted just slightly. "Why? Don't you trust me to manage it?" "Of course I trust you," I said quickly, backpedaling. "I just want to know where we stand." "We stand exactly where I've told you we stand," she said, her voice cool. "I'm handling it. Let me handle it." I dropped it, but the refusal felt strange. We'd always been transparent about money. Why hide an emergency fund? I overheard an argument between Patricia and Evan about college. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop. I'd just come home early and heard their voices from the kitchen. "We can't afford out-of-state tuition," Patricia was saying. "You need to be realistic." "I know, Mom. I'm looking at community college," Evan said. "Good, that's smart. You can transfer later if your grades are strong enough." "What if I get scholarships?" Evan asked. "I've been applying to—" "Scholarships are unpredictable," Patricia cut in. "Don't build your future on maybes. Build it on what's guaranteed." "Nothing's guaranteed," Evan said quietly. "Exactly, which is why you make practical choices." The conversation had a strange quality to it, rehearsed almost, like they were performing rather than discussing. Patricia's arguments were logical, measured, but something felt choreographed about the whole exchange. When I walked in, they both stopped talking abruptly. "Hey," I said. "Everything okay?" "Fine," Patricia said, "just talking about Evan's plans." Evan looked at me, something unreadable in his expression. Then he nodded and went upstairs. I wanted to ask what was really going on, but I didn't. I should have. Mara started clinging to me more around that time. Small things sitting closer on the couch during movies, asking me to help with homework she could easily do herself, finding excuses to be in whatever room I was in. "You okay, sweetheart?" I asked her one evening. "Yeah," she said, but she didn't move from where she was leaning against me. "Just tired." "School okay? Friends okay?" "Everything's fine, Dad." But it wasn't fine. I could feel it in the way she held on to me, like she was afraid I might disappear if she let go. She was 14, old enough to sense tension even when nobody acknowledged it out loud. Patricia noticed too. "Mara, give your father some space," she'd say, not unkindly, just matter of fact, and Mara would pull away, reluctantly, her eyes flicking between us like she was trying to solve a problem she couldn't name. I wanted to reassure her that everything was okay, that we were solid, that her family was safe, but I wasn't sure anymore if that was true. Something was shifting beneath us, subtle but undeniable. I just didn't know what yet. I started working longer hours without being asked, overtime whenever it was available, extra shifts, side projects, anything to bring in more money, to ease the pressure I felt, but couldn't quite locate the source of. I'd skip lunch to save a few dollars, walk instead of drive when possible, wear the same clothes until they were threadbare. Every sacrifice felt necessary, like I was doing what a man should do, absorbing hardship so my family wouldn't have to. Patricia noticed the longer hours. "You're going to burn out," she said one night when I came home after 10. "I'm fine," I said. "We need the money." "We need you healthy," she replied, but there was no real concern in her voice. "Just observation. I'm healthy," I insisted. "Just tired." Evan was still up, doing homework at the kitchen table. He looked at me with something that might have been pity or anger. I couldn't tell which. "You don't have to do this, Dad," he said quietly. "Yeah, I do," I said. "That's what fathers do." He didn't argue. He just went back to his textbook. But I saw him exchange a glance with his mother, brief but loaded with meaning I couldn't decipher. Patricia started making decisions for the family without consulting me. Small things that added up to something bigger. She'd switch insurance providers, change our phone plan, sell things from the house, all practical choices, all justified by saving money. "I thought we agreed to talk about big decisions," I said, after she'd canceled our cable. "It's not big," she said. "It's cable. We can't afford it." "I would have liked to discuss it." "Why? So you could feel guilty about it. I'm saving you the burden, Ray. You're already carrying enough." She made it sound compassionate, protective, but it felt like erasure, like I was being gently removed from the center of our life together, repositioned to the edge where I'd be easier to work around. "I don't want to be protected from decisions," I said carefully. "I want to make them with you." She looked at me for a long moment. "You're exhausted. You're working yourself to death. Someone has to think clearly, and right now, that's me." It sounded reasonable. It always sounded reasonable. But reasonable was starting to feel like a cage I didn't know I'd walked into. I found the bank statements by accident. I wasn't snooping. I was looking for last year's tax documents in Patricia's file drawer. The folder was labeled Emergency Account, and when I opened it, the numbers didn't make sense. Deposits. Regular deposits. Not $10 or $20 here and there like she'd said. Hundreds, sometimes more. Going back 3 years, maybe longer. I sat on the floor of our bedroom with the papers spread around me, trying to understand. The balance was substantial. Not enough to be rich, but enough to live on for a while. Enough to start over. My hands were shaking. Where had this money come from? We were struggling. We were barely surviving. Evan was working weekends. I was skipping meals. We'd turned off lights to save electricity. But here was proof that we weren't as broke as I'd believed. Patricia had money, hidden money, separate money. Money I hadn't known existed. I heard her car in the driveway and put everything back exactly as I'd found it. My heart was pounding. I needed time to think, to process what this meant before confronting her. Maybe there was an explanation. Maybe I was misunderstanding. But I wasn't. I spent the next week reconstructing the timeline in my head. The emergency account had been opened 4 years ago, right after Evan's college discussion first came up. Right around the time Patricia started pulling away, just slightly, in ways I'd convinced myself were stress. The deposits were consistent. Monthly. Like a plan being executed with precision. She'd been saving while telling me we had nothing to save. She'd been building an exit while I was building overtime hours. She'd been preparing for something that didn't include me. The math didn't lie. We'd had enough to ease some of the pressure. Enough to let Evan keep his weekends. Enough to keep the lights on without guilt, but she'd chosen not to use it. She'd chosen to let us struggle while she secured her future. I didn't confront her yet. I needed to be sure. I needed to understand the full scope before I said anything. Because once I spoke the truth out loud, everything would change. So I watched. I waited. I paid attention in ways I hadn't before, and everything I'd ignored suddenly became impossible to unsee. Patricia had never missed a payment. That's what struck me as I went through our records more carefully. In 4 years of barely scraping by, we'd never been late on rent, never had utilities shut off, never bounced a check. Because she'd been managing 2 budgets the whole time, the one she showed me, tight, stressful, demanding sacrifice, and the one she kept hidden, steadily growing in an account I wasn't supposed to know about. She'd controlled the narrative of our poverty while securing her own comfort. She'd let me sell my belongings, skip meals, work myself to exhaustion, all while she had a cushion she refused to share. Not because we truly needed to sacrifice, because she needed me to believe we did. I realized then that the struggle had been theater, a performance designed to justify her distance, her control, her separate planning. She'd made me the villain of our financial story while writing herself an escape route. And I'd played my role perfectly. The guilty provider, the inadequate husband, the man who needed to be managed because he couldn't manage himself. I'd believed it all. The savings weren't for emergencies. They were for after me, after us. After the marriage she'd already left in her mind, even while she still slept beside me each night. I sat with that truth for days, feeling it reshape everything I thought I knew. Every reassurance she'd given me had been a lie. Every "we're in this together" had been performance. She'd been preparing to leave for years, while I'd been desperately trying to hold us together. The devastation wasn't loud. It was quiet, heavy. It settled into my bones like cold I couldn't shake. I thought about confronting her, demanding answers, asking why, but what would that change? She'd already made her choice. The money proved it, the timeline proved it, the careful, calculated distance proved it. She was gone. I just hadn't realized I was living with a ghost. Evan found me sitting in the dark one night, staring at nothing. "Dad?" His voice was tentative, worried. "I'm okay," I lied. He sat down next to me. "No, you're not." And he was right. I wasn't. I understood then that the savings weren't about being prepared for disaster. They were the disaster. The evidence of how long she'd been planning to leave. How carefully she'd been protecting herself while letting me drown in guilt and inadequacy. 4 years. Maybe more. All those nights she'd shown me budget spreadsheets pointing to empty columns and saying, "We have nothing left." She'd had something left. She'd had her exit strategy growing quietly in an account she'd labeled emergency. But the emergency wasn't financial. It was marital. And she'd been preparing for it while I'd been working overtime to save a marriage she'd already abandoned. I felt stupid. Used. Like I'd been fighting alone in a battle she'd surrendered years ago without telling me. But more than that, I felt clear. For the first time in years, I saw the truth without the haze of hope or denial. Patricia didn't love me. Maybe she had once, but not anymore. And she'd chosen to plan her departure rather than fix what was broken. That clarity hurt, but it also freed something in me. A tension I'd been holding for so long I'd forgotten it was there. I stopped working overtime. Just stopped. Came home at regular hours, ate dinner with the kids, went to bed at a reasonable time. Patricia noticed but didn't comment immediately, probably thinking I was finally listening to her advice about burnout. But I wasn't listening to her anymore. I was listening to myself for the first time in years. I started protecting my energy, my time, my resources, not out of spite, but survival. If she'd been planning her future without me, I needed to start planning mine without her. I opened my own account, small deposits mirroring what she'd done, not to compete, but to prepare, to make sure I wasn't left with nothing when she finally decided to use that emergency fund for its intended purpose. Patricia didn't know yet. She was too focused on her own planning to notice I'd started doing the same. "You seem different," Evan said one evening while we were cleaning up after dinner. "Do I?" I asked. "Yeah." Less stressed, I guess. It's good. I nodded. I figured some things out, made some decisions. About what? About not carrying weight that isn't mine to carry, I said. He studied my face, then nodded slowly, like he understood more than I'd said. I started documenting everything. Bank statements, emails, conversations. Not for revenge. I didn't want revenge, but for protection, for clarity, for proof if I needed it. Patricia had been quietly building a case for her independence. I needed to build one for mine. I consulted a lawyer, just informally, to understand my rights, what divorce would look like, how assets would be divided, what custody arrangements might mean for Evan and Mara. "Are you planning to file?" the lawyer asked. "I don't know yet," I said honestly. "I'm just trying to understand my options." "That's smart," she said. "Knowledge is power, especially in situations where information has been controlled." Controlled. That word stuck with me. Patricia had controlled the narrative, the finances, the decisions. She'd controlled what I knew and what I didn't, and in doing so, she'd controlled me. But I was taking that power back, quietly, without drama. Just like she'd built her exit, I was building my awareness. And when the time came, when she finally made her move, I wouldn't be caught off guard. I'd be ready. Patricia must have sensed something shifting because she started being nicer, small gestures. Making my favorite dinner, asking about my day with what seemed like genuine interest, sitting closer on the couch during the rare moments we watched TV together. At first, I thought maybe she'd changed her mind. Maybe she'd realized what she was giving up. But then I recognized it for what it was: control maintenance. She was adjusting her strategy because something about my behavior had registered as outside her expectations. She needed me compliant, grateful, focused on our struggle rather than on her secrets. So she softened, just enough to keep me from asking hard questions. But I wasn't asking questions anymore. I was watching, learning, seeing patterns I'd missed when I'd been too desperate for her approval. "Everything okay?" she asked one night, her head tilted in that concerned way. "Yeah," I said. "Why?" "You just seem distant lately." The irony wasn't lost on me. She'd been emotionally gone for years, but the moment I started pulling back, suddenly she noticed distance. "Just tired," I said. She accepted that. She always accepted simple explanations. As long as I didn't dig deeper, neither would she. Evan cornered me in the garage one Saturday while I was organizing tools. "Dad, what's going on?" I looked up. "What do you mean?" "With you and Mom, something's different." I considered lying, protecting him the way parents do. But Evan was 18. He'd be gone to college soon. He deserved some version of the truth. "Your mom and I are figuring some things out," I said carefully. "Are you getting divorced?" The directness startled me. "I don't know yet. Maybe." He was quiet for a long moment. "Is it because of money?" "It's because of honesty," I said, "or the lack of it." He nodded slowly, processing. "I knew something was wrong. Mara did too." "I'm sorry you had to carry that," I said. "It's not your fault," Evan said. "I don't think it's anyone's fault, really. People just change. Or maybe they don't, and that's the problem." He was wiser than I'd given him credit for. Somewhere in the past few years, he'd grown from a kid into someone who understood complexity, someone who could hold nuance without needing to assign blame. I was proud of him, and sad that he'd had to mature so quickly. Mara became my emotional anchor without realizing it. She'd seek me out for small things, help with homework, opinions on music, stories about her day. Nothing heavy, just connection. And in those moments, I remembered why I'd stayed for so long. Not for Patricia, for Evan and Mara, for the chance to be present in their lives, to give them stability even when mine was crumbling. "Dad?" Mara asked one evening while we were both reading in the living room. "Yeah, honey?" "Do you think people can love each other and still not work out?" The question hit harder than she probably intended. "Yeah," I said carefully. "I think they can." "That's sad," she said quietly. "It is," I agreed. "But sometimes it's also honest. And honesty matters more than keeping something broken just because it used to work." She thought about that. "Are you and Mom honest with each other?" I wanted to say yes. I wanted to protect her from the truth. But I couldn't lie anymore. "We're trying to be," I said. That seemed to satisfy her. She went back to her book, and I went back to mine, both of us pretending we were reading while really just sitting with uncomfortable truths. I confronted Patricia on a Sunday morning. No yelling, no dramatics. Just the two of us at the kitchen table with coffee and the weight of years between us. "I found the account," I said simply. She went very still. "What account?" "The emergency fund, the one you've been building for 4 years while telling me we had nothing." She didn't deny it, didn't scramble for excuses, just looked at me with something like resignation. "How long have you been planning to leave?" I asked. "I wasn't," she started, then stopped. Reconsidered. "I don't know. I wasn't planning anything specific. I was just preparing." "Preparing for what?" "For whatever came next," she said quietly. "For the possibility that this wouldn't work, that we wouldn't work." "And you couldn't tell me that? We couldn't face it together?" "I didn't want to hurt you," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. "You already had," I said. "You just did it slowly, quietly. While I was breaking myself trying to save us, you were already gone." She didn't argue. She just sat there, tears sliding down her face, not from guilt but from relief. Relief that it was finally out in the open. Patricia admitted she'd left me emotionally years ago. Not all at once, but gradually. A series of small departures until one day she realized she was only staying out of habit. Obligation. Fear of disrupting the kids' lives. "I do love you," she said, "but not the way I used to. Not the way you deserve." "When did it change?" I asked. "I don't know exactly. Maybe after Evan was born, maybe before. I just woke up one day and realized I was going through motions instead of living them." It hurt to hear. But it also confirmed what I'd already known. I'd been loving a memory while she'd been planning an exit. "The money," I said. "Why hide it? Why let us struggle?" "Because I needed to know I could survive without you," she admitted. "I needed to know I had options, and I was afraid if you knew, you'd try to fix it. And I didn't want it fixed. I wanted out." The honesty was brutal, but it was also, finally, real. "So what now?" I asked. She looked at me, exhausted. "I don't know. What do you want?" And I realized I didn't want to fight anymore. Didn't want to beg or plead or convince her I was worth staying for. I wanted peace. Clarity. A future built on truth instead of performance. "I want dignity," I said, "for both of us." We told Evan and Mara together, calmly, that we were separating. No blame, no drama. Just two people acknowledging that love sometimes isn't enough to sustain a partnership. Evan took it stoically. Mara cried, but neither seemed surprised. They'd felt it coming, probably before I had. Patricia moved into an apartment 2 months later using the savings she'd built. I stayed in the house with the kids, at least until Evan left for college. We split custody of Mara amicably, focused on her stability rather than our hurt. People asked me if I was angry, if I wanted revenge, but I wasn't. And I didn't. Patricia had done what she thought she needed to survive, and now I was doing the same. I'd spent years sacrificing for a marriage that had already ended. Now I was choosing myself, my peace, my future. I focused on Evan and Mara, on being present instead of perfect, on building a life shaped by self-respect instead of fear. Patricia and I weren't enemies, we just weren't partners anymore. And accepting that, truly accepting it, felt like exhaling after holding my breath for years. I didn't hate her, I just chose me. And that finally was enough.